Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Sean Porter always believed predictability was a virtue. At 38, he'd built a solid career as an accountant at a respected firm in Austin, Texas. His life followed a steady rhythm, waking up at 6, brewing coffee before Brielle got up, reviewing financial reports in the afternoon, and getting home promptly at 6 p.m. It was an organized, structured existence, without big surprises. And Sean liked it that way. Brielle seemed to like it too, or at least that's what he thought. They'd gotten married 2 years ago in an intimate ceremony in the hill country, surrounded by vineyards and close friends. Brielle had worn a simple lace dress, and Sean remembered how she smiled when he stumbled over his vows, too nervous to speak properly. She was 33 at the time, working as a marketing manager at a boutique agency that specialized in luxury brands. She was creative, intense, full of ideas she scattered around the house on colorful post-its. Sean admired that about her, the way she turned abstract concepts into campaigns that sold dreams. He dealt with numbers, she dealt with emotions. It seemed like the perfect balance. Their house sat in a quiet suburban neighborhood, with a well-kept lawn and a porch where Brielle liked to sip wine on Sundays. Sean handled the finances, she decorated the rooms. They split household chores without major conflict. Friends called them the stable couple, and Sean had always taken that as a compliment. Stability meant trust. It meant security. It meant they'd built something solid. But on the night of March 14th, a Saturday Sean would never forget, it all crumbled with a single sentence. They were having dinner at home, a simple meal Sean had prepared, grilled salmon with asparagus. Brielle poked at her food with her fork, distracted, her eyes fixed on some indeterminate spot on the wall. She'd been acting strange for weeks, quieter than usual, always on her phone. Sean had chalked it up to work stress. The agency was competing for a big account, she'd mentioned it a few times. But that night, when he asked how her day had gone, Brielle set down her fork and looked him straight in the eye. "Sean, I need excitement in my life," she said, her voice steady, without hesitation. "I can't keep living like this." He blinked, confused, thinking he must have misheard. "What do you mean? Living how?" Brielle sighed impatiently, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "Like this. Predictable. Everything always the same. I wake up, work, come home, we eat, sleep, and it starts all over. I feel trapped in a routine that's taking me nowhere." Sean felt a tightening in his chest but forced a smile. Maybe it was just a rough patch, built-up fatigue. "We can change that, Brielle. How about we plan a trip? We could go to the West Coast, you've always wanted to see Big Sur. Or try something different on weekends, I don't know, dance classes, rock climbing." "It's not about that," she cut in, her voice sharper now. "It's not about adding things to the schedule. It's about how I feel. I need more intensity." Sean didn't know what to say. He just sat there, watching the woman he'd shared a bed with for years, and suddenly she felt like a stranger. Brielle got up from the table without finishing her dinner, grabbed her phone, and went to the bedroom. He stayed alone in the kitchen, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, trying to make sense of what had just happened. In the days that followed, the distance between them widened into a silent chasm. Brielle left earlier, came home later, always with vague excuses, client meetings, networking events, brainstorming sessions with the team. Her phone, once casually left on the table, now lived in her pocket, always screened down whenever she had to set it down. Sean tried to talk, suggested couples therapy, but Brielle said she was busy, that they'd discuss it later. Later never came. Sean started noticing little details he'd have overlooked before. Brielle changed clothes before heading out to these events, choosing tighter dresses, different perfumes. She smiled at her phone when she thought he wasn't looking. And there was an energy in her, an excitement, that hadn't existed when she was at home. It was as if she saved all her vitality for another part of her life, one Sean wasn't part of. The first concrete evidence came 2 weeks after that conversation. Sean was organizing the monthly bills, something he did religiously every first Monday. They maintained a joint account for shared expenses, and Sean always reviewed the statements to make sure everything was in order. That's when he saw it. 3 charges from upscale restaurants in downtown Austin. Not places they ever went together. The Driscoll Grill, Uchi, Juliet Italian Kitchen. Each bill ranged between $200 and $300. Dates: March 8, March 12, March 19. All weeknights. All during times Brielle had supposedly been at work meetings. Sean's pulse quickened. He tried to stay rational, looking for logical explanations. Maybe they really were client dinners. Brielle worked with high-end brands, it made sense she'd need to impress potential partners. But $300 for dinner? 3 times in 2 weeks? And why hadn't she mentioned any of it? He waited for Brielle to get home that night. When she walked in, it was past 10, and she had a faint smile on her lips that vanished when she saw Sean sitting on the couch with his laptop open. "I need to ask you something," Sean said, keeping his voice calm. "I saw some charges on the card. Really expensive restaurants. The Driscoll, Uchi. Were you dining with clients?" Brielle hesitated for a split second before answering. "Yeah, exactly. I'm trying to close that new account I told you about. It takes a lot of relationship building. $300 for dinner? They're high-level clients, Sean." "You know how it works," she said, a defensive edge in her voice. "Or do you think I should have taken them to Chili's?" Sean could have let it go. He could have believed her. But something about the way she avoided his gaze, the way she crossed her arms over her chest, set off every accountant's instinct in him like a red alarm. Numbers don't lie. And her behavior didn't match her story. That night, after Brielle fell asleep, Sean did something he never imagined he'd do. He took the shared laptop they used to watch movies and accessed her phone's backup account. Brielle had enabled automatic iCloud backups months ago so she wouldn't lose photos. They'd shared devices and never kept secrets, until now. Sean clicked on the recent photos folder. What he saw made his stomach churn. Dozens of photos. Brielle in poses she never used on social media. Intimate, suggestive shots, some in lingerie he didn't recognize. And worse, these weren't just solo selfies. There were attached messages, exchanges with someone saved as Z. The messages had timestamps from the past few weeks. "You look incredible. Can't wait to see you again. Last night was perfect." Sean's hands began to shake. He scrolled further. There were photos of Brielle he'd never seen before, taken from professional angles with careful lighting. Sensual photo sessions. And then he saw it, a message from Z that read, "Loved our session today. You're the perfect muse. Dinner tomorrow?" That's when it hit Sean. 3 months earlier, Brielle had mentioned hiring a photographer to update her professional portfolio, something about needing more modern images for LinkedIn and the agency's website. At the time, Sean thought it was a good idea. Now, he realized he'd been naive. He closed the laptop, took a deep breath, and made a decision. He wouldn't confront Brielle without solid proof. He wouldn't give her room to spin more lies. If he was going to do this, he'd do it right. The next morning, Sean looked up private investigators in Austin. He found a discreet office in South Austin with good online reviews. He called during his lunch break and scheduled a meeting for the following day. The receptionist asked what the case was about, and Sean simply said, "I need to confirm a suspicion." The investigator's name was Marcus Tomlinson, a man in his mid-50s with gray hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen it all. He listened to Sean explain the situation with a neutral expression, jotting notes in a worn-out notebook. The photographer's name? Marcus asked. I only know she refers to him as Z in the messages. But I can give you the dinner dates, the places. Can you figure out who he is? Marcus nodded. I can. It'll take about 10 to 15 days, depending on what I find. I'll need photos of her, basic info, and everything you already have. Sean handed over everything, screenshots of the messages, dates, locations, the mention of the photographer. Marcus said he'd be in touch as soon as he had something concrete. It would be expensive, almost $2,000, but Sean didn't hesitate. He needed to know. He needed the raw, unfiltered truth, with no room for denial or manipulation. The next 12 days were the longest of Sean's life. He kept up his normal routine, going to the office, coming home, having dinner with Brielle as if nothing were wrong. But inside, every fiber of his being was on high alert. He watched her every gesture, every time she smiled at her phone, every exit for yet another work event. Anger simmered slowly, a coal turning into contained flames. Brielle seemed oblivious to the storm brewing. Or maybe she just didn't care. She remained distant, glued to her phone, going out frequently. There was even one night she didn't come home at all, texting him at 11 saying she'd stay at a friend's place because they'd had too much to drink at a happy hour. Sean replied with a simple, okay, but he didn't sleep. He stayed awake until 4 in the morning, wondering where she really was. On the 12th day, Marcus called. I've got the report. Can we meet? Sean left work early and drove to the investigator's office with his heart racing. Marcus greeted him with a brown folder in hand and a grave expression. I found quite a bit, Marcus said, laying the folder on the table. The guy's name is Zachary Cole. 33 years old, freelance photographer, mostly does portraits and personal shoots. Lives in an apartment in East Austin. And yes, he's been involved with your wife for at least 3 months. Marcus spread out the photos. Brielle entering Zachary's apartment on different dates. Brielle leaving hours later. The two of them dining together at the Driscoll Grill, sitting side by side at a corner table, hands intertwined on the tablecloth. One particularly gut-wrenching photo showed Zachary kissing Brielle at his apartment door, under the glow of a street lamp. Sean picked up each photo, studying the details as if auditing a financial statement. Dates, times, locations, all matched Brielle's absences, the expensive dinners, the phone messages. Marcus had done meticulous work. There's more, Marcus said, hesitating. I looked into his background. Zachary Cole has a pattern. In the past 2 years, he's been involved with at least 4 clients. Always married women. And in 2 of those cases, there are records of him asking for money afterward. Sean's head snapped up. What do you mean, asking for money? Blackmail, basically. He threatened to expose the affair unless they paid. In one case, the woman filed a police report but dropped it before trial. Probably paid up. Sean's anger now burned like a furnace. It wasn't just betrayal. Brielle was being manipulated by a predator who turned extramarital affairs into a revenue stream. And she, in her search for the excitement she craved, had walked straight into the trap. Can you prove he asked her for money? Sean asked. Marcus shook his head. Not directly. But I can give you the contacts of the other victims if you want to build a case. I also found something interesting in the finances. He pulled out a bank statement. Your wife made 3 electronic transfers in the last 45 days, all from her personal account, the one you probably don't monitor. $12,000 total. Always to his personal account, not a business one. Sean's jaw clenched. $12,000. Money that, in practice, belonged to their shared financial life, vanishing from her personal account without a word. Money earned from the overtime hours and side projects he'd taken on to guarantee stability for their relationship. Brielle had taken it without asking, without mentioning it, and transferred it to a con man who was extorting her. "I want all of this documented," Sean said, his voice colder than he intended. "Every photo, every financial record, everything. And I want the contacts for the other women. I'm ending this today." Marcus handed over the complete folder. "Good luck. And if you need testimony for the divorce, you can count on me." Sean drove home with the folder on the passenger seat. It was 4:30 p.m. Brielle would be home around 6. He had time to prepare. He spread the photos across the dining table. Printed out the bank statements, highlighting the transfers. Organized everything chronologically, just like he did with financial reports at work. There was something almost therapeutic in the methodology, in turning emotional chaos into concrete data. When he finished, the table looked like a documented crime scene. Which, in a way, it exactly was. At 6:15, Sean heard the key turn in the lock. Brielle walked in carrying her purse and phone, eyes glued to the screen as she typed. She didn't even look up as she entered the living room. She only stopped when she saw Sean sitting motionless at the table, everything laid out in front of him. Her phone almost slipped from her hand. "Sean, what?" she started, but her voice cracked when she saw the photos. She instinctively took a step back, as if she could escape what was right there. "Sit down," Sean said. It wasn't a request. It was an order, firm, non-negotiable. Brielle hesitated, then slowly moved to the chair across from him. Her hands trembled. She opened her mouth to speak, but Sean raised his hand, silencing her. "First, you're going to listen. Then, if there's anything worth saying, you can talk." He pointed to the first photo. Zachary Cole. Freelance photographer. 33 years old. You hired him for a professional shoot 3 months ago. Except it wasn't professional, was it? It was the start of an affair you kept hidden while lying to me every night. Brielle had gone pale. "Sean, I can explain. I'm not done." His voice had a steel edge. "You dined with him 3 times just in the past few weeks. $300 a dinner. Money from our joint account. Money I earned. And here's the best part, you transferred $12,000 to him." $12,000. Sean tapped the bank statement. "Care to tell me what that was for? A gift for your lover? Or did he ask for it?" Tears began streaming down Brielle's face. He said he'd tell you. That he'd expose everything. I didn't want you to find out like this, so you paid him." Sean laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You paid a criminal with money that wasn't even yours alone to hide your affair. Brielle, do you have any idea who this guy is? He does this professionally. You're the 4th married woman he's blackmailed in the last 2 years." Brielle covered her face, sobbing. I didn't know, Sean. I felt invisible, faded out. I wanted to remember what it felt like to feel something intense again, something that made me feel like I still existed." Sean leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. "Invisible? Faded out? Brielle, I woke up every day thinking about how to make you happy. I paid the bills, took care of the house, planned our future. But stability wasn't exciting enough, was it? You needed something more intense. So you found yourself some sleaze who photographs vulnerable women and then extorts them. Congratulations. You got your intensity. Please, Sean, I made a mistake. It was all a huge mistake. I'll end it with him right now, we can go to therapy, I promise." "No," the word came out dry, final. "We're not going to therapy. We're not fixing this. You made a choice, Brielle. Several of them. You chose to lie, to cheat, to steal. And now you'll face the consequences." Sean slid an envelope across the table. Brielle looked at it like it was a bomb. Inside is my lawyer's contact info. Divorce papers will arrive by the end of the week. You can hire your own lawyer or sign without contesting. I don't care. But I want you out of my house today. Today? Brielle stood up, desperate. Sean, you can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go? To Zachary's apartment, I guess. Or a friend's place. Not my problem. He stood too, gathering the photos and statements, putting everything back into the folder. Oh, and one more thing. I'm reporting Zachary to the police for extortion. I have contacts from his other victims. If you want to cooperate and recover at least some of the money he stole from you, I suggest you're honest with the authorities. Brielle stood in shock, frozen, tears still falling, but she made no attempt to wipe them. You can't do this. It's going to destroy me. Sean paused at the living room door, looking at her one last time. You destroyed yourself, Brielle. I'm just giving you exactly what you asked for a few weeks ago. Remember? Excitement. There's nothing more exciting than losing everything because of stupid choices. He left the room, went upstairs, and locked himself in the guest bedroom. He could hear Brielle sobbing downstairs, heard her finally come up and start packing things in their room. An hour later, he heard the front door slam. He looked out the window and saw Brielle loading 2 suitcases into her car, getting in, and driving off without looking back. Sean sat on the bed, the investigator's folder still in his hand. He felt the weight of everything crash down on him, anger, sadness, relief, exhaustion. But he also felt something else, clarity. For the first time in weeks, he knew exactly what he needed to do. The next morning, Sean called the lawyer a colleague had recommended, Ryan Mitchell, a specialist in contentious divorces. Ryan reviewed everything, heard the full story, and agreed Sean had a strong case. With this evidence, she won't have grounds to contest anything. And the misappropriated money? We can include that in the proceedings. You'll get it back. Meanwhile, Sean also went to the police station and filed a formal complaint against Zachary Cole for extortion, presenting the investigator's report and the contacts of other victims. The officer who took his statement, a sergeant named Ramirez, frowned as he read through everything. That name's come up here before. We'll investigate. The following days were a blur of lawyer meetings, document signings, and calls to the bank to secure the accounts. Brielle tried calling a few times, but Sean blocked her number. She sent long emails, apologizing, saying she was sorry, begging to talk. He didn't reply to any of them. He'd passed the point where words mattered. 2 weeks later, Sean learned through Ryan that Zachary had been arrested. The investigation revealed a wider scheme. Not only was he blackmailing his lovers, but he was also selling their intimate photos on online forums. Warrants were issued for revenge porn, extortion, and fraud. Brielle was called to testify as a witness. The divorce moved quickly, given the circumstances. Brielle didn't contest the terms. Sean kept the house, the cars, and recovered the $12,000 through a court order that froze Zachary's accounts. The asset division was heavily in his favor, since Brielle had violated marital trust in a documented and irreversible way. But the consequences for Brielle went beyond the divorce. When her colleagues at the agency found out about the affair, the diverted money, and her involvement with a criminal, her reputation collapsed. Clients started canceling contracts, citing they couldn't associate their brands with someone of questionable values. A month after the divorce was finalized, Brielle was fired. She tried to maintain her relationship with Zachary, maybe seeking some meaning in the chaos she'd created. But when Zachary was released on bail and realized Brielle had cooperated with the police, he blamed her for his arrest, screamed that she'd ruined everything, and blocked all her contacts. Brielle was left alone, unemployed, with her reputation in ruins, and no one to blame but herself. Meanwhile, Sean focused on rebuilding. He sold the house, it was too big for one person and full of memories he no longer wanted. He bought a modern apartment downtown with a view of the river. He started going to the gym, something he'd always put off. He made new friends through work and running groups. He accepted a consulting project that took him traveling more, experiencing new cities, new restaurants, new rhythms of life. 8 months after the divorce, Sean met Alicia at a networking event hosted by his firm. She was a financial analyst at an investment company. They started talking about markets, but the conversation drifted to hobbies, travel, books. Alicia had a dry sense of humor that made Sean laugh, and a sharp intelligence he found attractive. They exchanged numbers. It wasn't a whirlwind romance at first. It was gradual, careful. Sean had learned to be cautious with trust. But Alicia was patient, transparent, consistent. She said what she thought, kept her promises, and didn't hide her phone when they were together. Small gestures Sean now valued far more than before. One Saturday afternoon, as they walked together through Zilker Park, Sean realized he was happy. Truly happy. Not the illusory happiness built on ignorance, but something deeper, built on conscious choices and mutual honesty. Alicia was talking animatedly about a new work project, her eyes sparkling. Sean took her hand and knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. The encounter with Brielle was purely by chance. Sean was at a corporate event downtown, one of those formal dinners the firm hosted to impress clients. He was chatting with Alicia and a business partner when he spotted Brielle across the room. She was alone, wearing a gray suit that looked too big, as if she'd lost weight. Her hair was shorter, lacking the shine it used to have. She held a glass of wine, scanning the room with a lost, out-of-place expression. When her eyes met Sean's, she stopped breathing for a second. Sean held her gaze for a moment, then gave a slight nod, a polite, distant gesture. There was no anger in it, but no warmth either. It was the kind of nod you give a distant acquaintance, someone who once mattered but is now just a figure from the past. Brielle tried to smile, a shaky, failed effort. She took a step toward him, but Sean had already turned his attention back to Alicia, who was telling a funny story about an eccentric client. He laughed, genuinely, and naturally, protectively, placed his hand on Alicia's waist. When Sean looked again to where Brielle had been, she was already gone, vanished into the crowd. He felt no urge to go after her. There was nothing left to say. That chapter of his life was closed, filed away, and he had no interest in reopening it. Alicia noticed something in his expression. "Everything okay?" she asked softly. "Everything's great," Sean replied, and it was true. He smiled at her, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Want to dance?" They moved to the dance floor, and as the music played and Alicia laughed at something he whispered in her ear, Sean realized Brielle had been right about one thing: he really did need excitement in his life. But not the destructive kind she'd sought, not the kind built on lies and betrayal. The excitement Sean had found was quieter, deeper. It was the thrill of waking up next to someone who chooses to be there. Of building something real, based on transparency and mutual respect. Of knowing the person beside you is exactly who they say they are. Brielle had looked for excitement in the wrong places, and paid the price. Sean learned that true intensity doesn't come from escaping reality, but from embracing it fully, with all its imperfections and possibilities. And as he danced with Alicia under the soft lights of the ballroom, Sean knew he'd made the right choice. He'd given Brielle exactly what she'd asked for, excitement. Just not in the way she'd expected. And in the process, he'd freed himself to find something infinitely better. Life, Sean discovered, had a curious way of delivering justice. Not always quickly, not always obviously. But eventually, everyone's choices come back to collect their price. Brielle chose instability and ended up with chaos. Sean chose dignity and found peace. And in the end, that was the sweetest revenge of all, simply moving on and being happy. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.